I want you to change the world, and don't think that this is going to happen peacefully or you can do it alone. We need to kill the rich. You get out there, you use your weapons, and you rip Washington apart. You hunt down the billionaires, the bank bosses, the CEOs, the scumbags and the liars, the governors, the lobbyists, the senators, because they're all the same, and you hang them.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's April 30th, 2018. I'm Eric. How y'all doing? I hope you're all well. This is a continuance of my video regarding, or entitled, laying out evidence of your slave status. So, I'm going to quickly summarize what I went over in that video and then continue where I left off, because it's a rather long paper. Again, it's written by a doctor. Although I've talked about this stuff numerous times, you all know that my channel was taken down, and now I have to remake some of the videos, and that's cool because I've learned a lot since making some of them. You might recall that I've told you time and time again that the Constitution isn't the rule of law here in the United States, or the law here, but rather a corporate constitution, which is completely different than the one George Washington and those guys came up with. You might recall that I've told you, as soon as the United States became a corporation, the Constitution was null and void. It no longer was applicable. And this is the legal framework for a continuance of those kinds of policies. Alright. And so, after World War I, or during World War I, by 1917, the United States was involved in World War I, and it was recognized that there's probably enemies within the country, the borders, or allies of the enemies. And Congress passed an act which identified who could be declared enemies of the United States, and in this act we gave the government total authority over those enemies to do as it saw fit. We also see, however, in Section 2, Subdivision C, in the middle and again at the bottom of the page, other than citizens of the United States. That was how it was originally written. Other than citizens of the United States. Now, in 1933, they tweaked that act some. And, well, I think just giving you the act will probably serve it justice a whole lot better than any summary I could give it. So this is in Section 5B of the same Act, and this is Exhibit 19. And the purpose of the Act was to define, regulate, and punish trading with the enemy, and for other purposes. And this is Section 5B of that same Act. Trading with the Enemy Act. That the President may investigate, regulate, or prohibit under such rules and regulations as he may prescribe by means of licenses or otherwise any transactions in foreign exchange, export or earmarkings of gold or silver, coin or bullion, or currency transfers of credit in any form other than credits relating solely to transactions to be executed wholly within the United States. And it was written so that the citizens of the United States were specifically excluded from the War Powers Act. At that time, we the people were not enemies, and therefore the government did not have total authority over us as they were given over our enemies. You must understand that when they made that change and declared the citizens of the United States enemies of the state, you became property. Your children became property. You are the property of the government, and they can do with you what they please. If they want to come to my home right now and drag me off simply for making videos and saying some of the things I do, and they can do that, and they can put me in the deepest, darkest fucking hole you can imagine. And this is one of the reasons why I talk constantly about how dangerous the government is, about how foolish it is to give a body of people that kind of authority over you. Okay. So, we need to draw attention again to the fact that the citizens of the United States in October of 1917 were not called enemies. The government, under the war powers of this act, did not have the authority over us. We're still protected by the Constitution, and it was only granted over enemies of the nation. In Section 2 of the Act of March 9th, 1933, Exhibit 17, Subdivision B of Section 6 of the Act of October 6th of 1917, as amended, is hereby amended to read as follows. So, you see that they are now going to amend Section 5. So let's see what it says after that about the American people. During time of war or during any other period of national emergency declared by the President may, through any agency that he may designate or otherwise investigate, regulate, or prohibit under such rules and regulations as he may prescribe by means of licenses or otherwise any transaction in foreign exchange, transfers of credit between or payments by banking institutions as defined by the President, and export, hoarding, melting, or earmarkings of gold or silver, coin, or bullion, or currency by any person within the United States or any place subject to the jurisdiction thereof. So, they changed it to from foreign enemies to anybody. And that is where we were when I left off. And this is how the police get away with murdering people because technically they're under the state of emergency and acting as such. Okay. And this is where I'm going to start back off, and it's a kind of a brief summary of what I just said, but the more I say it, the more you'll understand that this is the current law. This is the law we live under now. The people of the United States are now subject to the 1917 Trading with the Enemy Act, and amended for the purpose of all commercial and monetary, in effect, all business transactions. We, the people, became the same as the enemy, and were treated no differently, and still are not treated any differently. Actually, I venture to say that some of our actual enemies are probably treated much better than the citizens of the country. It is important to note that in acts of October 6, 1917 and March 9 of 1933 it states, during times of war or during any other national emergency declared by the President. Like the war on terror, like the war on drugs, like the war on poverty, the war on this, that. They always find an excuse to renew these powers. And then shortly after 9/11, I think it was a matter of days, they passed the Patriot Act, which really is supporting of this. It really gives more detail about the power. But it is just a complementary bill to this. At the end of the day, it all goes back to first the creation of the Federal Reserve, and then World War I and Trading with the Enemies Act. So, okay. Again, through any agency that he may designate or otherwise investigate, regulate, or prohibit under such rules and regulations as he may prescribe by means of licenses. What can the President do now to we the people under this section? And again, he can do anything he wants to do. It is totally at his discretion. And he can use any agency or any license that he desires to control it. This is called a constitutional dictatorship. And by the way, many people are hailing Donald Trump for going after, people like, oh shit, I just did a video on that chick. I was just talking about her. Damn it. The Smallville actress. All he's doing is going after the small potatoes to make it appear as though he's keeping his word. If he wanted these people locked up in dungeons for the rest of their fucking lives, he apparently has the power to do that. And he has to know that he has that power. In Senate Document 93-549, Exhibit 20, Congress declared that a serious emergency existed at 48 Stat. 1. The exclusion of domestic transactions formerly found in the Act were deleted from Section 5B at this time. Our Congress wrote that in the year 1973. Now let's find out about the Trading with the Enemy Act of October 6 of 1917, quoting from a Supreme Court decision, Storr versus Wallace in 1921. The Trading with the Enemy Act, originally and as amended, is strictly a war measure and finds its sanctions in the provision empowering Congress to declare war, grant letters of marque and reprisal, and make rules concerning captures on land and water. You remember your Constitution? Congress shall have the power to declare war, grant letters of marque and reprisal, and make all rules considering the capture on the land and water of the enemies. All rules. If that be the case, let us look at the memorandum of law that now covers trading with the enemy, the memorandum of American cases and recent English cases on the law of trading with the enemy. Exhibit 22, remembering that we are now the same as the enemy. In this memorandum, we read, every species of intercourse with the enemy is illegal. Every species of intercourse with the enemy is illegal. This prohibition is not limited to mere commercial intercourse. Additionally, no contract is considered as valid between enemies, at least so far as to give them a remedy in the courts of either government. You know, that should just be a matter of common sense. Why would one nation state give another, an enemy nation state, any kind of legal remedy in their courts? It doesn't make any fucking sense. Okay. So, no contract between is considered valid between enemies, and they have no remedy in our court. In the language of the civil law, no ability to sustain a persona. I'm not sure what that Latin is, but I think it's having to do with having standing in this jurisdiction. I really need to get a Latin tutorial and maybe broaden my language horizon some. In other words, they have no personal rights at law in court. This is the case of the Julia of 1813. In the next case, the case of Sally, 1814, Exhibit 23, we read the words, by the general law of prize property engaged in an illegal intercourse with the enemy is deemed enemy property. It is of no consequence whether it belongs to an ally or a citizen. The illegal traffic stamps it with the hostile character and attaches to it all the penal consequences of enemy ownership. Reading further in the memorandum, again from the case of the Rapid, the law of prize is part of the law of nations. In it, a hostile character is attached to trade, independently of the character of the trade who pursues or directs it. Condemnation to the use of the captor is equally the fate of the property of the belligerent and of the property found engaged in anti-neutral trade. But a citizen or an ally may be engaged in a hostile trade and thereby involve his property in the fate of those in whose cause he embarks. So, no, they can just take her property. Okay? That's the bottom line. That's what they're getting at here. Moving forward here. From Senate Report 113, Exhibit 26, in which we find an act to define, regulate, and punish trading with the enemy and for other purposes, we read, the trade or commercial regulated or commerce regulated or prohibited is defined in subsection A, B, C, D, and E, page 4. This trade covers almost every imaginable transaction and is forbidden and made unlawful except when under the form of licenses issued by the Secretary of Commerce. This authorization of trading under licenses constitutes the principal modification of the rule of international law forbidding trade between the citizens of belligerents. For the power to grant such licenses, and therefore exemption from the operation of law, is given by the bill. So, no trade, no intercourse, and they mean literally and figuratively intercourse. They're not only talking about business here. It says no trade can be conducted or no intercourse can be conducted without a license because by mere definition of the enemy and under the prize law, all intercourse is illegal. Once we were declared enemies, all intercourse became illegal for us. The only way we can do business or any type of legal intercourse was to obtain permission from our government by means of a license. And we are required to have a Social Security card, which is a license to work, and a driver's license, which gives the government the ability to restrict travel. All business in which we engage ourselves requires us to have a license, doesn't it? I mean, you've seen cases here in recent times where the police will make children take down their fucking lemonade stands because they don't have the proper paperwork. They don't have the proper license. Now, once the state of emergency is lifted, all property seized from the enemy, meaning you, meaning the people other than you or us here in the United States, they have to return the property. So, okay. The ultimate ownership of all property is in the state. Individual so-called ownership, you see how that's worded? Individual so-called, is only by virtue of government, i.e. law, amounting to mere user, and use must be in accordance with law and subordinate to all the necessities of the state. Now, can you say with a straight face that you're free and you're not a slave? Can you? Who owns all the property? Who owns the property you call yours? Who has the authority to mortgage property? Let us continue with a Supreme Court decision, Exhibit 29, United States v. Russell. Private property, the Constitution provides, shall not be taken for public use without compensation, or just compensation. That is the peacetime clause, isn't it? Extraordinary and unforeseen occasions arise, however, beyond all doubt in cases of extreme necessity, in time of war, or of immediate and impending public danger, in which private property may be impressed into the public service, or may be seized or appropriated to public use, or may even be destroyed without the consent of the owner. And you must remember the term property applies to you. You are property of the state. And the author says this quote, and indeed this case provides a vivid illustration of the potential power of the government. Okay, now let's return to the period of time after March 4th, 1933, and take a close look at what really occurred. On March 4th, 1933, in his inaugural address, President Roosevelt asked for the authority of the war powers and called for a special session of Congress for the purpose of having those powers conferred to him. On March 2nd of 1933, however, we find that Hubert Hoover had written a letter to the Federal Reserve Board of New York asking them recommendations for action based on the overall situation at the time. The Federal Reserve Board responded with a resolution, Exhibit 30, which they had adopted, an excerpt from which follows. Resolution adopted by the Federal Reserve Board of New York, whereas, in the opinion of the Board of Directors of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, the continued and increasing withdrawal of currency and gold from the bank of the country has now created a national emergency. Now, to appreciate the significance of that, you must recall that in 1913 the Federal Reserve Act was passed authorizing the creation of a central bank, the thought of which had already been noted in the Constitution. The whole purpose was for people to deposit their gold and get a slip of paper saying that that slip can be redeemed at any time for any reason for the gold, and of course that's ended up not being the case later on, right? Until 1933, that agreement, that contract between the Federal Reserve and its depositors, was honored. Federal Reserve notes prior to 1933 were indeed redeemable in gold. After 1933, the situation changed drastically. During the depths of the Depression at the time, when we, the people, were struggling to stay alive and keep our families fed, the bankers began to say people are coming in now wanting their gold, wanting us to honor this contract we have made with them. See, they made the contract with the people and then broke it. And who are the banks ran by? Yeah, you're right. And in their culture, it's okay for them to break the contract with a goy. Specifically says it in their Babylonian Talmud. Now, how could that happen? Reading from the public papers of Hubert Hoover, Exhibit 31, now therefore, be it resolved that in this emergency the Federal Reserve Board is hereby requested to urge the President of the United States to declare a bank holiday Saturday, March 4th and Monday, March 6th. In other words, President Roosevelt was urged to close down the banking system and make it unavailable for a short period of time. What was to happen during that period of time? Reading again from the Federal Reserve Board Resolution, Exhibit 31, we find a proposal for an executive orders to be worded as follows. Whereas it is provided in Section 5B of the Act of October 6, 1917, as amended, that the President may investigate, regulate, prohibit under such rules and regulations as he may prescribe by means of licenses or otherwise any transaction in foreign exchange and the export, hoarding, melting, earmarking of gold, silver, coin, or bullion, or currency. Now, in any nominal usage of the American language, the standard accepted meaning of a series of 3 asterisks after a quotation means that what follows also must be quoted exactly, doesn't it? If it's not, that's a fraudulent use of the American language. At that point marked by red asterisks above began, what did the original act of October 6, 1917 say? Referring back to Exhibit 19. other than credits relating solely to transactions to be executed wholly within the United States. This portion of Section 5B specifically prohibited the government from taking control of we the people's money and transactions, didn't it? However, let us now read the remainder of Section 5B of the Act of October of 1917 as amended March 9th, 1933 by any person within the United States or any place subject to the jurisdiction thereof. So basically the amended version, again, includes the people of the United States, and they can do with you as they please. So I think I'm going to end that right there. I know I only went over a small amount of new information, but this report is very lengthy, and I'm going to break it up so you don't get too bored with it. It's very important that you know this stuff because, you know, like G.I. Joe says, knowing is half the battle. And again, these are not my words. These are words of a doctor. And you know, although I do talk about this stuff very, very, very frequently. Hope everyone has a great day. Remember, kill the state before the state kills you.